Hello and welcome back to the Sidetracked Sport Podcast. I am your host Jasmine, and in today's episode I am joined by the lovely Chi, and we're going to be talking about social class barriers into sport. Now, Chi is currently doing her master's in video journalism, so she's a fellow journalist, but she also has particular interest in tennis, rugby and F1, and she's very clear that tennis is at the top of that list, guys. So Chi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. That was like the most magical introduction. I don't even have to say anything now. Like, hi. That's all I will have to say. I'm good there. How are you?
I'm good. So I think, first of all, do you want to talk me a little bit through how it is you got into tennis, like whether that be playing, watching, just sort of tell us, because that's your sort of main sport of interest, tell us how you got into it really.
Yeah, so I genuinely think ever since I could walk, I've played tennis. So I have played since, I don't know, probably like four-ish. At that point, it was literally just like a kid running after a ball. That was the limit of my tennis. But so I lived in Zimbabwe for a bit, and then when I came back to England, that's when like my mom started like getting me like into little kids clubs, and ever since then I've just played. I come from quite a tennis family. My mom is a big tennis fan. Roger Federer is like her main man, but but yeah, I think it was kind of just destined that I was gonna play at some degree, but perhaps not at the length that I ended up playing for.
That's perfect, because I think in this discussion, I think tennis will probably be one of those sports that we do come up with. But first, when we're looking at social class, I think it's important to just first of all give a little overview of like what social class is, because most people just think of it as like you're rich or you're poor, and like those are the two sides, but it's a lot more sort of complex than that, I guess. And you sort of do have working class, but you have sort of lower working class, middle working class, like it's all very different. And like none of the statements that we're going to be saying will be blanket statements across like a whole demographic of people. And so I think it's just important to sort of recognize that right at the start before we delve into things. And also something that I think is going to be relevant throughout our conversations as well, because obviously we're talking about social class, and a lot of things, often when you're talking about these things, you compare sort of privately educated children to state educated children. Yes, there are other schools as well, but those are the sort of two main ones in these sorts of discussions. And how many people go to private schools? It changes, but at the moment the stats coming out are about 7% of British school children attend a private school, and that does increase when you look at just those aged 16 or over. But school-age children overall, just 7% go to private school, which is quite small, but quite a lot at the same time. It's a weird sort of idea. Do you want to sort of talk us through, Chi, like what your sort of schooling experience was like here in the UK and in Zimbabwe?
So I am quite interesting, I think. I sound so big-headed. When I was said to people, because I've been to a lot of schools, so I think I've been to like 5, 6 schools overall, and I have gone to think every type of school possible. So obviously, when I was in Zim, I just did nursery there. So that was just like normal, like stay. It wasn't like any fancy. It was called Buttons and Bows. It wasn't anything fancy. Then when I came to the UK, actually, I did go to private school. So come for me. But I started in private school until about year 3. So I did one private school that closed down. Then I went to another one. And year 4, I then went to like a Catholic state school, which was obviously a big difference. Um, but I think because you have that Catholic base, it's still quite strict. Like if anyone's been to a Catholic school, like you know what I'm on about. Then high school, I went to like a grammar school. Wasn't state school. Wasn't a private school, but it's one of those schools they have to do like an exam to get into. That time, did that for a year, and then I went to a normal state school, and that that actually was so much fun. I loved it, but it was once again a massive, massive difference from like what I'd been to the year before that. Like even uniform wise, class size wise, like all those different things were so different. Um, Obviously also different backgrounds compared to like from private school. So I did that for the majority of my high school, and then sixth form I did go back to private school, sixth form, which was by then such a cultural shock as well.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah, that was. I was like, what is going on? Yeah.
And yeah, so for myself, I've been in state education like my whole time in school, but I was in quite a nice primary school, and like my secondary
Mm,
school honestly wasn't great, but I lived in like a nice-ish area, and I was
yeah.
always fortunate, like my parents always like had me in loads of different sports, and like that was something that I know my mum was always very active in, like trying to get me into. She just wanted me to enjoy sport, and so
Yeah.
like I've had sort of that experience side of it, and it's always been something that my mum sort of encouraged to do and sort of chosen to
Mm,
be a priority, I guess, but still been fortunate she was able to do that.
yeah.
And so when we look at sports, I think if you were to sort of go onto the street and ask people, name me some posh sports, what do you think they might say? I haven't got like any right or wrong answers. I'm just interested what you might say.
Oh, you've got to put like rugby. I'm so sorry, has to go. Will
Yeah.
go down. Like whether you still think it is or not, it has to be there. I feel like polo, like equestrian, like those sort of things will be in there. F1, F1. Yeah.
I think F1 is a
F1.
to do F1 is more
Yeah,
posh, but I think to watch F1 it's becoming more like normal for anyone, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. I think if it's anything besides Monaco, I think that has a very like posh reputation, but you're doing it in Monaco, like of course. I I don't even think I could enter Monaco with my bank balance. Like they'll probably say no, got to turn around. But so you got to be some kind of something for Monaco. But I think it is becoming a lot more. It's a weird one that I think.
Yeah, and I think for me as
Yeah.
well, I definitely agree on the rugby front, but for me as well, stuff like hockey, I think that's a big one.
Mm,
Just like normal field hockey. I mean, ice hockey. We don't really have that so much in the UK, but
no.
but
Yeah.
mostly field hockey. I don't know if I'd say posh, but like cricket to me is one. I don't know if it was just my school, but I feel like it's taught more often in private schools than maybe in state schools. And I think that's probably why
Yeah.
I perceive it to be slightly more posh.
Yeah. No, I can see that as well.
Yeah. And
Especially in the UK.
yeah, especially, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but rugby. So I
Yeah.
think it is that
Yeah.
classic thing, isn't it? It's, what is it? A gentleman's game played by thugs. Like, is that the right way
No,
around? Or
that's football, no, isn't it? Football.
is it a
Then
thugs game
it's a
played? Oh yeah, a thugs game played by
yeah,
gentlemen. That's the
yeah,
right way around. Like, it is. It is very weird when you look at sort of rugby and football and the two ways that they both sort of developed in this country predominantly, sort of side by
yeah.
side, but like two very different ends of the social class
Very
spectrum. And when you look at sort of how most children are taught them, most people will play football in the park when they're younger at some point. Like
yeah,
that's quite common for kids. Whereas you don't really just like go and kick around a rugby ball unless you've been taught to play rugby. And I
yeah,
think it is a very typically private school sport to be taught.
yeah.
What was your experience in school? Obviously, as a woman, it might be slightly different to the men,
Yeah.
but what was your experience of seeing rugby and sports in general being taught in a private school setting?
So I personally like. I think out in high school. I mean, they tried to introduce it for the girls. I think they had 2 sessions, but it obviously just didn't carry on. So like, I did it for like maybe 2, 3 weeks, like in school, and that was it. But the boys, I think they played for like a term. You know how they have like different PE blocks? I think they did get to play for a term, or they had an after school session. I can't even remember exactly which one. But there definitely was an opportunity for the boys. But it wasn't something in school that was a lot of emphasis on. Like, you didn't, it wasn't. yeah, it wasn't a big sport in high school. Like when I say high school, so I think of like those 4 years. Really, that's my main reference point. But it wasn't a big sport. I think the only reason I probably had like awareness of it is because my family, they're quite like big rugby fans.
Mm,
My cousins played a lot of rugby. Um, and they played in South Africa, so that's a very different scene.
yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, so South Africa is that's like rugby home. Um, but they did go to private school, so I wondered if they were in state school would that have been different, but I don't think it would have been because of the country they were in.
Mm,
But yeah, I think in the UK it wasn't for my school experience. It definitely wasn't something that was done, especially for the girls. Like that wasn't, yeah,
yeah, and I think that is
and
really
doing
interesting, sort of thinking about, like throughout this, sort of thinking about the difference between maybe in men's sports and women's sports.
yeah,
But I actually do have a little stat from the Men's Six Nations. So this is according to the Telegraph, by the way.
right.
How many of the men, what percentage do you think of the Men's Six Nations team went to a private school? If you had to just guess.
I think the first one I can think it didn't go to private school was Ellis Grange, and so
I
I'm
love
gonna
Ellis.
like I've got all of them. um, I'm saying like 50% went to private. No, 50, 55. Yeah,
It was 66%.
bloody sorry.
It is a lot, and I'm sure a lot of
Yeah.
like people listening, they probably thought it probably was maybe around 50%. I before I found that stat, I thought it would have maybe been about half as well. But still to be well over half, I think is
Is
quite a culture shock. And
Yeah, and it's
it
quite telling, I think.
yeah, because a lot of
Yeah.
people do play rugby at sort of maybe grassroots level, but it does
Mm,
seem that maybe to get to that top level at international stages, that going to a private school does still have that benefit, whether it just be because
yeah,
you have more like I guess priorities on sport within school, whereas in a state school
yeah, true.
priority isn't necessarily sport. And then obviously
Yeah,
if you go to a better private school, maybe more likely to get into a better university that still plays sport, and it's maybe easier to carry on playing the sport as well. It's not just because you've gone to the school, I think.
yeah, no, that's a really good way of putting it. But yeah, that's shocking when you say 7% is been to private goes to private school, but 60, that's such a huge disparity.
It
You can't even.
is. And I mean, I couldn't find the information on it, but I would be interested to know what the difference is in the Women's Six Nations squad, whether
Yes.
it's a similar percentage or less or more, because we're still coming into women's sports. I think it's hard
Mm,
to know where those percentages lie because I couldn't find that information anywhere.
yeah,
And I don't really know any of their schoolings or like backgrounds in when they were children. And I think it would be
yeah.
interesting to know the difference and see whether maybe whether women's sport there's a higher percentage, maybe even because in
Mm,
those traditionally private schools there is that priority on sport, and so more girls are probably doing sport in private schools than they maybe are in a state school potentially.
yeah, I mean, I think I was just thinking it would be so interesting. Although, just this is completely speculative. I would assume that women's would be a lot less
Mm,
private school. I don't know why. I feel like the women's rugby team, they definitely wouldn't have played it in schools. I feel like it would have been a case where they've played it like at clubs,
yeah.
and had to go like extracurricular, go travel somewhere else to play the sport.
Mm.
So I don't know whether it's yeah. I would assume that it would be less on the women's side.
Because I
But I don't
think
know, that is just me.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
from my perspective of what I've seen of private schools, the sports for women and girls that are mostly taught are, is it hockey, lacrosse?
Yeah.
What other sports do you think it would be? Netball, hockey, lacrosse, netball.
Netball, no 100. Tennis, to be fair, if you have the grounds, because
Really?
yeah, like if you have the grounds to do it, at my sixth form they had tennis courts,
Oh wow.
which yeah, to be fair, they also did it at my high school, but that was because we were joined to a like not a country club, a leisure centre.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
so we could use like the leisure centre courts. But no, my sixth form did have its own tennis courts. Also had its own cricket batting cage thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think when you have the grounds, those sports become
Mm.
way more accessible.
And I guess that is part of it, because a big thing in sport is obviously just having the facilities, and the better the
Yeah,
facilities you've got, the better well, even
absolutely.
just the more time then you can spend doing it. Like if you've got an
Yeah.
indoor batting cage for cricket, that means that you can play cricket all year round. You don't have to just play it
True.
in the summer when it's most
Yeah.
likely still going to be raining anyway.
Yeah.
And so therefore you're going to naturally be better at that sport because you can practice it more often. And I think that's quite interesting actually to think about. It's something I'd not necessarily thought about, in the difference in facilities that private schools have, and how
Yeah.
actually that alone can impact the sports performance of their students. And I think
No,
that's so interesting.
100%. And it's also, I think, a massive thing with private school is um there's a certain leniency that you can have, which you can't have with state schools. So I remember those one person at my when I was in sixth form, they were doing really well in tennis, and you can literally, because the class size is so much smaller, you can tailor their education around the sport they're playing. In the state school, you have not got the facilities and the backing and the money and everything to be doing that for one student. Have so much time to really maneuver and cater to one student like that. I think that's another thing that really like has such a great effect when it comes to these sports like tennis and rugby and all that, and why it can be better for athletes in that private school setting.
Yeah. And I think there was a piece of like social content you did a while ago. I don't know if you
Mm,
will remember which one I'm talking about, but you went to a women's, I think it was a women's premiership game,
yeah.
and you asked people in the crowd watching whether they still think that rugby is a posh sport.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think the responses to that were really interesting, because
Yeah.
a lot of them didn't really feel that it was.
Yeah. Which I also was taken aback because I I thought a lot more people would think so. And then some of the comments to the video also were quite conflicted. And there was like some people saying yes, some people were saying no. And once again, I do think it depends geographically. Like one commenter from Australia, she sort of said, well, in Australia, like that is not a posh sport. That's just like one the sport. I know they have rugby league, which is more predominant, but rugby is just like such a common sport, so there's no sort of like barriers within it. Um, but then in the UK, I think it's getting better. I will
Yeah.
say, I definitely think it's getting better, like 100%. But I still think, like, if you compare it to football, they're still so like worlds apart in that sort of respect.
Yeah. And I guess potentially there are a lot of people that maybe watch rugby that don't consider themselves to be like posh, or maybe didn't go to private schools, and maybe that's why they don't see it as a like a posh sport, because they
Yeah,
themselves maybe played it when they were younger, and they went to a state school or not a private school,
mm,
and they maybe now they watch it with their family, and like they go to these games and they just enjoy watching, and they don't necessarily know or think about actually how many of the players on the pitch are privately educated. To them, it's just a fun day out to go watch the rugby, and like they
yeah,
just watch it like they would, some people would watch a football game, and like they don't necessarily think about maybe the social aspects that go into building the sport, which I think maybe
yeah.
contributed to a lot of people not necessarily considering it a posh sport, I think.
True. Yeah. And what actually I think is a question is like, what do we consider posh?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say is like, how would you define it? Because that's also another thing I think has different meanings for what
Yeah.
posh is.
I feel like
Like, I used to be
that's,
called posh. I'm like, oh, am I? Well, I'll take it.
I guess, yeah, it's an interesting point, because I guess to me, if I was to call something a posh sport, it would be something where the majority of people playing that sport, or at least a disproportionately high percentage of people playing that sport are maybe from a privately educated background. It doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
mean it's like bad or anything.
No.
Like, I'm not saying that like posh sports would be bad. I mean, I love rugby, so I love watching it. I don't particularly care if I'm not going to choose a team to support because there's less people that are privately educated on the team. That's not how it goes.
That's so not how it goes.
But I think to me, that is how I would maybe consider what is a posh sport or what isn't. I don't know if that would change for you as someone who's been to a few different types of schools.
Oh, I think it's a hard one because I think immediately my mind jumps to wealth. It's like, but then also we know that wealth doesn't mean you're posh.
Yeah.
Especially like today, there's I wouldn't say so, but it is an interesting one.
Because especially if you're saying wealth, it's like, well, a lot of footballers are paid absolutely insane amounts of money.
Yeah,
But would you call all of
exactly.
them posh, or would you call the sport posh? Not really, no.
No,
Like,
no,
it is a
absolutely.
really weird sort of construct, and
Yeah,
one that I actually don't know how I would specifically define against all sports. And I
yeah.
wonder, for me as well, my experience. So I went to Loughborough University, which is a very, 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 very sporty
That's
uni.
very.
And for me, it was interesting going there and seeing all of the different sports and actually getting to know people and seeing how many people there as well were privately educated as
Yeah.
well. And I think sports, that's sort of where I got the perception of things like hockey, lacrosse, netball. Like, I played netball in school because I think
Yeah.
most girls in school will have at some point,
Yeah.
but I've never
Very
played
true.
hockey and I've never played lacrosse. And these were sports where we had like 6 or 7 women's teams, and to me I was like,
Oh,
how is there that many people? And like, it was super competitive to get into them, and I'm like,
yeah.
where did all these people learn to play these sports? It really
That's
it really shocked
crazy.
me. And
Yeah.
even just, I think, I don't know obviously the specific numbers because I didn't go and ask everyone on those teams, but I know that the majority of them were privately educated, and that in itself surprised me quite a lot, especially because like athletics, track and field would be like my sort of top sport, and I think it's maybe more of an inclusive sport socially, I think, because you can sort of just go to an athletics track and join your local club. It's typically a bit cheaper than maybe some team sports or ball sports, and if you just want to run, you can run, I guess. Like, obviously you
True.
need some shoes, etc., but comparatively it's maybe a bit cheaper and easier to get into for people with maybe a lower social class background, I think.
No, very true.
Yeah,
Like,
but also at the same time, when you look at Team GB, so the team that go to the Olympics, obviously not just athletics but across all sports, the majority of, well, it's not majority, but they are still disproportionately high on people that were privately educated, although the number is decreasing. So we clearly are getting a bit more equality in people that are maybe making it through to these sports. And I think that comes with a lot more like programs encouraging people to get into sport. And I think a lot more people are seeing the value in continuing to do sport for longer.
yeah.
And because in Tokyo, so for the 2020/2021 Olympics, around 40% of Team GB were from private schools, whereas for Paris last year, just 33% were. So that's actually quite a big drop, I think, in just 3/4 years' time. And I think
That's
that's going to
massive.
be interesting to see how that maybe changes going forward, whether it will maybe plateau or continue to go down and sort of become a bit more representative of that 7% that we mentioned at the start. It'll be interesting to see, I think.
No, that's actually quite a big jump as well. Like when you think about it, I mean that's a whole yeah. That's quite incredible actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess when we look at those different sports, I don't know, I couldn't find numbers on it, but I feel like there is a decline in disproportionate representation in privately educated people in a lot of sports. It's hard to find a stat across like everything, because there's so many different sports. But I don't think it's because less people from private schools are doing sport. I think more people from state schools are doing sports for longer. And I do think that maybe more women doing sport is helping that figure, because
Yeah, very true.
you are just having more women full stop competing and doing sport, and so therefore it's maybe balancing out the scale a little bit. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years how that's going to continue to change.
Yeah, no, for sure. Actually, I think women go women's sports. They are. We're starting to get like real traction, aren't we?
Mm,
Like there's, yeah, it's really beautiful to see actually. But yeah, I think that is a real figure as well. That's probably helping
mm.
I'm a little bit more balanced. Yeah,
But
yeah,
I think at the same time, though, I think if we're going to look at how maybe women's sport is affecting social class sort of and the way into sport, it's also important to look at maybe how it's maybe not going to help, because more young girls in private schools who have that access to sport already are going to maybe just keep playing sport even after they leave school. And so, not that they shouldn't, they obviously should if they want
yeah,
to,
no,
but I think there's recognizing that side of it as well, especially when you then look at national teams. It will be interesting to see how that impacts national teams going forward, because sort of just children that are in school now, we maybe won't see that for 5 years or so, how that might change. And children that were in school and quite young, maybe when the Lionesses won the Euros a few years ago, and maybe depending how they'll do this year, maybe this year, and like the Women's Rugby World Cup later this year, it'll be seeing those events down the line. I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how they impact the demographic of people that are participating in these sports.
yeah. No, I think you gotta give it time. I think to see like what comes out of that. But no,
Mm,
I think I do think it will keep girls, state school or not, more locked in into the sports.
mm,
Yeah, I'm just analyzing now like my experience with sport in state schools comp in comparison to being in private school. I think the odd thing is when I was in private school, I was like over 16, so I left GCSEs,
mm.
or I was like a really, really young. So obviously, I also know that it's not like I can't really give like a full representation.
Do you see maybe like any difference in friends from those different schools in their sort of interest in sports at all? Can you see that difference within like the friends you've made, or is that something that isn't so maybe evident?
Interestingly, in state school, I think when you have a sport that you're passionate about, because you have to like seek out those opportunities, I think there's a certain, oh, I feel like I might come under fire for this, but I think you have to have a lot of drive to to find those opportunities to play that
Mm,
sport if it's not right on your doorstep. So now when I look at my friends who did play sport competitively and at a really high level, one, a lot of them were in state school, um, and a lot of them, if not all, are still to a degree, probably not like trained for the Olympics still,
mm.
but they're still like very much involved in the sport that they were competing in or just playing in. Like even me, I still play tennis now. I'm not trying to be like the next Serena Williams or anything, but still involved in that sport.
Mm.
When I look at my experience at sixth form and sport in that respect, ah, I was only one of my friends. She was a really great swimmer, and she still swims now, like through uni and stuff. But once again, not competing at that level. But she was the only other person who um was like that involved in sport. And interestingly, she came from a similar background to me from
Okay.
going through state school. Oh no, actually no, that's a lie. She came from a different economic class than everyone else
Right.
in our class. But no one else in terms of the girls I think was like really into sport like that. I think it was just really us two.
Mm. I think that is really
Yeah.
interesting, because I
like
guess
in my class.
yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, if you're having to sort of go almost out of your way to try and get involved in sport, you're maybe more likely to do it for longer and dedicate more time to it because you've already
Mm,
put that effort in. Whereas if it's on your doorstep, like at school, and you know you've got like the tennis courts and whatever else,
mm.
you've got these facilities. It's maybe more normal, and so you, it sounds kind of harsh, but maybe don't quite value it quite as much, and
No,
maybe that's why.
100%.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. I'd not thought of that
Yeah.
aspect of it. But yeah, and I think like a good thing to recognize, like as we come to the end, is that like things obviously are changing and getting better. Like we can see that with the numbers I
For
said with
sure.
Team GB, that more, I guess, less posh, so to say, people
Mm,
are doing sport for longer and getting to those high levels. And that's because we are seeing a lot more drive for people, just in anyone in general, to just participate in sport at whatever level. And I think that means that people our age have sort of had that drive from when they've been young to, you know, just do sport for fun, even if you just enjoy it, you're not competitive. And so naturally more people are just trying to get to those high levels, I think.
no, for sure. And I can vouch for tennis in the terms that it's starting to become a lot more inclusive. Even just like initiatives since moving to London. Shout out She Can Serve, and Black Tennis Mentors. Just bringing in people from such various backgrounds into the sport. Because I mean, growing up, you had Serena Williams, Venus Williams as like role models, and that was kind of it. And even playing the sport was very different. But I can see it definitely getting better. Of course, I do think there's so much barriers to it.
Mm.
Even just a book out of court in the park, it's like £10 sometimes. That's a lot of money if you think about it.
Yeah.
Just to play, just to set foot on a court, £10 an hour. That's without coaching, rackets. So yeah, so there's still a lot to it, but it's getting there. It's just a slow process.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a really great point. Like places like She Can Serve, like I've seen sort of that program initiative. I'm not quite
Yeah,
sure what you call it, like community. And we
yeah,
are seeing a lot more things like that for various sports of people that are maybe in their like mid-ish to late 20s that have sort of created these communities and programs to encourage people just to even just try sports.
yeah.
And whether that be like for younger children getting into sport or for people our age just to maybe do it socially. And I think that's
Mm,
going to have quite a big impact going forward as well because it's going to just give people more opportunities to try different sports that they maybe
yeah.
haven't tried. Like I said to Chi before we started recording, like I really want to learn to play tennis this summer because I've played tennis once at school and like I just really want to, really want to like actually learn a little bit, not just like whack the ball and like see how it goes. Like I actually want to
Yeah.
learn, and I think that would be so fun.
No,
And
it is a fun
yeah, and
sport.
like those sorts of programs are going to be great in giving people like that sort of opportunity just to try something out for the first time. And
Yeah.
like even if like that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to end up at the Olympics for that sport, but like even if they just enjoy it, and then maybe when if they decide to have kids, they might get their kid involved, and like it's a big cycle of things that we're going to see
Yeah.
impact going forward, I think.
No, very. I think it was actually quite interesting. This is like a little bit digressive, but what you said earlier on, it was like it was your mom who was pushing you to do sorts.
Mm,
And I was like, that is so interesting. And it was my mom who pushed me,
yeah.
because she was also very sporty. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting how like our moms were the ones that were, listen, let's get you trained, let's
Yeah.
get you ready.
And I guess we're sort of seeing that impact of like these women that maybe grew up with their mums maybe not being able to do a lot of sports because it sort of wasn't socially acceptable then. And I know we're sort of
Yeah,
moving away ever so slightly from social class into gender here, but it all kind
yeah,
of links together. And
yeah, 100%.
seeing our mums sort of do that to us, and then maybe if we have children, I'm sure that we'd want our children to be involved in sport, whether they're like boy, girl, whatever. And so I
Mm,
think it is a sort of cyclical thing that it's going to sort of keep pushing it forward, and more and more children are going to sort of keep getting involved in sport. And I think it
yeah,
is important to see that the intersectionality of it, that women's sport is going to sort of equal it out maybe a little bit, I think.
yeah. No,
And
100,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm really excited to see what this summer of sort of the Euros and the Women's Rugby World
yeah.
Cup, how that is really going to impact things going forward, because
I think
I'm
it's
very
gonna be
excited.
massive. it's gonna be such a, I just feel like a very, very big year for women's
Mm.
sport. It really does. I was like something about this year, just feel like the stars are just aligning, and I've seen my angel number a few times. Don't wanna. I'm like, okay, I'm seeing good signs. Something looks good here. But yeah, it'll
Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
I think that's a great way to finish our podcast episode today. So,
Thank you so much for having me. I had
no,
so much fun.
thank you
Thanks,
for
Bessie.
joining me, Chi. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, so much for listening and getting sidetracked with us. So, I will see you in the next episode. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.